Weaponry is an integral part of the Dark Souls series. They define your character's build and will carry you through the game. Your choices in weaponry can definitely impact how you play the game. There are literally hundreds of weapons in the Dark Souls series. Some of them are really good, some of them are useless, and some of them are situational. It also depends if you are playing the game online against other players or just playing against AI enemies. The developers of the series, From Software, have a tradition of adding quirky weapons in each game of the series. These weapons are usually a one-off thing in the game, so they are unique and sometimes just found once in the series. They usually mimic their original wielder's traits, but not always. These weapons are not necessarily the best, but they are definitely the coolest and most badass. So, ladies and gentlemen, here are the 10 weapons that I think are the coolest in the Dark Souls series. Number 10. Puzzling Stone Sword. Found in Dark Souls 2, in the first DLC, Crown of the Sunken King, this straight sword functions like a whip, which is a one-off thing in the series. There is no weapon like this one in any other game in the series. It has unique thrust attacks, while at the same time it can be flung like a whip, which is unrealistic of course, but badass nonetheless. I remember the excitement I had when I first acquired it. It's such a cool weapon, but despite its super cool and versatile moveset, it wasn't top tier due to its very low damage, but it was a good call from the developers since it would have been super strong if it had more damage. Another super unique straight sword from Dark Souls 2 was the Ivory Straight Sword. Found in the third DLC, Crown of the Ivory King, it emits and attacks with beams of light instead of solid steel. Just looking at it is super cool. Even its heavy attacks is special and found nowhere else, and it also did a ton of damage too. Number 9. Golem Axe. Found in Dark Souls 1 after defeating the Iron Golem and acquiring his soul. This axe is not popular by any means, but its heavy attacks are super awesome. It's a range attack that sends your foes flying and can be manually aimed easily. I remember once invading 3 people who were all using it at the same time. It was hilarious. Although I don't think there is a direct follow-up to this weapon, but the Winged Knight twin axes from Dark Souls 3 looks very similar, although it lacks the range attacks. It still has its unique spin attack that you can continuously do as long as you have stamina. Number 8. Grant. Found in the Tomb of Giants in Dark Souls 1, it's a divine weapon that is blessed by the Way of White. It requires a mixture of strength and faith in order to wield it. It's influenced by the weapon Brand from Demon Souls, which was wielded by Garl Vinland. What puts it on this list is its heavy attack, which is almost identical to the Wrath of the Gods spell, so it's an AoE attack that obliterates any foes in close range combat. This was followed up by Morn's Hammer from Dark Souls 3, which is also a strength/faith weapon with almost the same AoE blast, but it's not triggered with a heavy attack like in Dark Souls 1. It's a weapon art instead. There's another version of it in Dark Souls 2, albeit a bit different, and that's the Wrathful Axe found in the first DLC. It has a similar blast on its L2 attacks that inflict dark damage. It's also very unique and out of place weapon in Dark Souls 2, as it shares movesets from many different weapon classes and has many unique things going for it. Number 7. Bone Fists. Found in the third and last DLC in Dark Souls 2, the Crown of the Ivory King. This is From Software's best attempt in doing a fist weapon. Usually fist weapons lack any range and the damage they do is not the best, but somehow they were able to do a super viable fist weapon that has crazy moves. You can kick, super punch, and even has a Hadouken type of attack that looks glorious. This is a fist weapon done right. Number 6. Twin Princess Greatsword. Found in Dark Souls 3, this weapon is a result of combining 2 weapons together, Lothric's Holy Sword and Lorien's Greatsword. So in order to get this weapon without any external help, you need to proceed to NG+ to get this weapon. It's directly influenced by Demon Souls' Northern Regalia, which also was a combination of 2 weapons. The reason for this weapon being on this list is its cool weapon art. The first one is a super fast beam of light that gives you a ton of range, which gives this greatsword an edge when compared to other greatswords in Dark Souls 3. Its second weapon art is a stomp buffed with fire that has a ton of hyper armor frames and deals very respectable damage. Number 5. Dragon King's Great Axe. A Dark Souls 1 weapon, it's found by cutting the Gaping Dragon's tail in the depths area. The cool thing about this beast is its heavy attacks. It causes a mini earthquake around the player and demolishes anything in the vicinity. It can also be buffed with resins or spells, which in turn makes the mini earthquake blast even stronger. Many weapons follow the footsteps of this weapon in the series. We got the Stone Great Axe, which was added in the DLC in Dark Souls 1, that also has a super unique follow-up on its heavy attacks that sends your foes flying in the air. We have the Dragon Slayer Great Axe in Dark Souls 3 that also does a similar move on its weapon art, but with a hint of lightning, since dragons are weak to lightning and hence the name. Finally, we also got the Quake Hammer from the latest Dark Souls 3 DLC, Ashes of Ariandel, that has a similar weapon art that is a mix between the Dragon King's Great Axe and the Stone Great Axe. Number 4. Gold Tracer. Found in Dark Souls 1's DLC, this weapon has one of the coolest movesets in the whole series, and it's not just cool, it's also a top tier weapon and one of the best bleed weapons in the series, if not the best. Attacking with it is super fast and has a wide range of attacks. When equipped in the left hand, it will gain a new moveset that is even cooler and more erratic. The reason for the new moveset is that this weapon is supposed to be paired with a Dark Silver Tracer, just like how Kyrian did, the original wielder of these weapons, although this weapon is best when two-handed in PvP due to its high poise damage. This weapon's model can be found in the files of Dark Souls 3, and it has a unique moveset too, and can also be equipped, so there might be a chance that we will see it in the next DLC. Number 3. Artorias weapons. There are many Artorias weapons in the series. Before the DLC in Dark Souls 1, Artorias was only mentioned in the item descriptions, and he had 3 equipments tied to him. The Great Sword of Artorias, both the standard and the cursed version, and the Great Shield of Artorias. This Great Shield is also in Dark Souls 3, but it's named Wolf Knight's Great Shield. Both weapons had unique but lame movesets and required a super high level build in order to use them properly. Then the DLC came, and finally, we met Artorias in person, which was one of the coolest moments in the series. But that was also the beginning of a new tradition in the series. It started with another Artorias weapon in the DLC, the Abyss Greatsword. This was the real deal. This weapon actually mimicked the real Artorias we meet in the DLC. It had the super unique spin attack and the insane leap attack. Then Dark Souls 2 came out. There was no signs of Artorias weapons until the second DLC dropped, Crown of the Old Iron King, where you find the weapon, Majestic Greatsword, found in one of the towers. As soon as you wield it, you will realize that this is Artorias' weapon, or the Abyss Greatsword at least, or some copy of it. And oh damn, this is my favorite version. When equipped in the right hand, it will function like many standard greatswords in Dark Souls 2. I think it is identical or very similar to the Claymore. But when you equip it in the left hand, just like Artorias, you gain 50 extra damage and the Artorias moveset. This time around, it's much more refined and viable, and I have to say, you feel like a total boss when using it. The most awesome thing with this version is when you dual wield it with other weapons, which unlocks a new moveset that might be the coolest moveset ever. Just take a look at it, man. Just take a look at it. After all this, Dark Souls 3 came out and we had a new version for the Abyss Greatsword. It's named Wolf Knight Greatsword, which retains all the original aspects of Artorias weapons. It even has the same heavy attack as the original and cursed Artorias Greatswords, which is not particularly good, but they gave this weapon the right homage. The new Artorias weapon, although not technically but was definitely influenced by him, is the Farron Greatsword, one of my favorites in Dark Souls 3. It has a one-off moveset that no other weapon has. Super unique and super fun weapon to use, and just by looking at it, you'll know what I mean. Number 2. Dragon Ultra Greatsword, found in Dark Souls 1 in Ash Lake after cutting the dragon's tail. So this is one of the dragon weapons in Dark Souls 1, which by the way, I'm kinda disappointed they never included them in Dark Souls 3, but despite that, it looks super awesome and the heavy attacks are eye candy and just so good and practical as it gives you a ton of range with an ultra greatsword. If reaching Ash Lake and stumbling upon it for the first time was not memorable enough for you, finding this secret weapon will. Another similar weapon in Dark Souls 1 is the Drake Sword. Also found by cutting Hellkite's Wyvern's tail, it has a very similar heavy attack as the Dragon Ultra Greatsword, although much weaker. Dark Souls 2 had a similar dragon weapon, but it's a curved greatsword instead of an ultra greatsword. It's called Curved Dragon Greatsword. I would say this one's range attack is even better as it's much wider and has an insane range. At one point, it had one of the highest critical attacks in Dark Souls 2, but so much has changed since then. Also, the Drakewing Ultra Greatsword has a special attack that is not the same as the previous two, but is still super cool, and it's a dragon weapon in a way, but for accuracy's sake, it's a Drake weapon. Unfortunately, only 2 weapons in Dark Souls 3 pay homage to this style of heavy attacks, and they are much weaker too. First is the Talibone Short Sword, which is more similar to the Drake's sword. The second weapon is the Firelink Greatsword, the final boss's weapon in Dark Souls 3. It inflicts fire, but I would say it's much weaker than the Dragon Ultra Greatsword and the Curved Dragon Greatsword. So there is a bonus weapon before number 1, and that's Obsidian Greatsword. This weapon was originally my number 1 spot, but I couldn't fit it in the end. The Obsidian Greatsword is found in Dark Souls 1 in the DLC after cutting Calamete's tail. The special attack on this thing is glorious. I just love it. It might be my favorite special attack in the series. There is nothing like it anywhere in the series, unfortunately. The name of the weapon, the super cool model, and the unique way you get this weapon makes it one of the coolest weapons ever. Number 1. The legendary Moonlight Greatsword. No matter how much I spin it, I always go back to the Moonlight Greatsword. It's found in every Soulsborne game. The Demon Souls version is the most different as it doesn't have beams of moonlight, nor does it inflict magic damage. It was unique in that, since it's made out of light, it totally ignores shields. So if it's a weapon in Dark Souls, it will be a weapon that has 100% penetration against shields, which is insane. In the Dark Souls series, my favorite is the one in Dark Souls 1, but if you look at the Soulsborne series as a whole, the Bloodborne one is my favorite. In Dark Souls 1, you find it by cutting Seath's tail. The Moonlight Greatsword almost always inflicts magic damage. The one in Dark Souls 1 does pure magic damage, which is super unique when compared to other weapons. In Dark Souls 2, there was 2 versions of it. The Blue Moon Greatsword, which was the fake version of the Moonlight Greatsword, which was wielded by and obtained from Benhart of Jugo. The second one is the real Moonlight Greatsword, found by killing the spider boss in either NG+ or by using a bonfire ascetic. The Dark Souls 3 version is found after killing Osiris and then transposing his soul with Ludleth from Firelink Shrine. All the Moonlight Greatswords except the Blue Moon Greatsword has a super fantastic beam attack. The reason I like the Dark Souls 1's version is that it is the most insane beam attack as it has a huge radius on the blast. If you, for example, backstab somebody in PvP, if you're lucky, you can keep using the beam attack every time they get up after the backstab. This will keep them on the ground until death, which is kinda hilarious. So that's all for this list. I know a lot of you might disagree with my picks, but that's fine. Let us know what you think are the coolest weapons in the comment section below. Furthermore, I know that there are still super cool weapons out there in the series, but that's all I can fit on this list. I hope you enjoyed the video, everyone, and if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe as that helps out a ton and I'll really appreciate it as well. See you on my next video. Farewell.